Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks. We are post the first week of Nationals, and all of my thoughts about Part the Misfail have been confirmed. When I was originally thinking about Part the Misfail, I kind of had this notion in my head that this is probably the best set that FAB has ever put out there. And after playing it very intensely for 2 weeks, obviously I didn't do a video last week. I was busy just preparing for Nationals, and sort of that was the time that I had for FAB. I have doubled down on that opinion more and more than I thought I would. In fact, I've been surprised. So let's break down Part the Misfail, and let's break down this concept that I'm starting to talk about, and the title concept of this episode, which is FAB 3.0. So when I say FAB 3.0, let's start with sort of breaking down that concept, because I think definitions are very important if we want to communicate with the same language. So obviously the donation of a .0 or a number, .0 designation indicates that we're talking about a distinct new version of a product, or a distinct new paradigm or existence of, something that's changed significantly enough that I don't feel like it's the same as it was before. So when I say .0 or 3.0, that is the technical term used a lot by developers to indicate a new release or something that has fundamentally changed within a product or a service. So I'm going to start using the word FAB 3.0 in this episode to designate something that I believe is a fundamental change within the product and the state and the, existence of Flesh and Blood. It's worth noting, though, that when I say FAB 1.0, that definitely exists. FAB 2.0 is a phrase used by the developers. So let's break those down a little bit before I start talking to you about what I think FAB 3.0 actually is. So FAB 1.0 is pretty simple to acknowledge. It is the start of Flesh and Blood and WTR, the alpha, the beta, and the, I guess we'd say, delta sets. The first three sets, Crucible of War included, probably leading into Tales of Aria, as well as sort of Everfest, etc. Whether you include Uprising is a bit of a question mark, but I think you probably could include Uprising in FAB 1.0. Though, to be honest, I think I'm more comfortable kind of drawing a line under the set at like Everfest and saying that everything pre-Everfest is 0.10. So Welcome to Wraith, Arcane Rising, Monarch, Crucible of War, Tales of Aria, etc. Generally, now, the developers have said the primary difference between 1.0 is that in 1.0, action points were seen as easier to get, and they were more generous with them. And that's why you see heroes like Kano, people who can easily get go again, even heroes that shouldn't get go again a lot, being able to get a certain amount of go again, relatively easily. And huge combat chains from people like Chain and things like that, where I don't think Runeblade was ever necessarily meant to have huge combat chains. But that kind of thing. So basically they were talking about how easy it was to get action points, especially with a view towards Kano, and sort of Ninja as well, like Ninja just being able to get tons of free action points, which is why, some of Uprising feels like 1.0. And then they started to get kind of, I don't want to say stingier with action points, but definitely when you get to Outsiders, the idea that you're going to get go again on everything you do is not as common. I also personally view 1.0 as kind of a learning phase, a very big learning phase, kind of the first learning phase in terms of what makes a good set, what makes a good product. The other feature of FAB 2.0, which is touted a lot by the developers and LSS, is that FAB 2.0 also saw the change in box distribution from having a first edition and an unlimited, or in the case of Everfest, only a first edition because they printed a lot of it and unlimited wasn't needed, into what we have in Uprising, which is the printing of a joint first and unlimited in one product, where basically your rainbow foils and your cold foils come side by side, and you can open a cold foil up until the product is taken off the shelf. Whereas remember, in the previous first editions of a set, the first edition had cold foils, Unlimited had rainbow foils. And this was a very big change in terms of price, availability of legendaries, and other cards as well. And also a very big change in terms of pack feel, because a lot of people will tell you that when you were opening first edition, it felt great. And then if you came back and opened that set in Unlimited and you could no longer open cold foils, it did not feel as good. So that's kind of like the two markers of FAB 1.0 versus FAB 2.0, is how freely action points were available to heroes that aren't supposed to have a lot of action points, and then also the product distribution, first edition, second edition, into what we are now. So how long then did FAB 2.0 last? That's the question. And honestly, like if we're talking about how long FAB 2.0 lasted, in my mind, it lasted until here, right? And I'm going to provide some logic for why I separate Bright Lights from what I'm calling the Heavy Hitters era, or 2024, right? Okay? I'm going to provide some logic for this. So, what really changed between Uprising, Dynasty, Outsiders, and Bright Lights into Heavy Hitters that makes it worthy of saying FAB 3.0 started here? Any guesses? Well, you can make your guesses in chat, or in the comment section if you think there's anything I've missed. But let's look at the three things that really changed. Firstly, while we'd had a focus on Marvels in Uprising, they were severely limited to a specific class or one or two things that caught the developers' attention. Right? We'd seen a full art hero appear twice in Everfest as a very rare card. You know, Stavro, even though his band still commands £50. Icelander appeared, obviously, for the first time in full art versions. And then we had Uprising, which came with lots of dragons and left everyone that wasn't illusionist feeling kind of sad about their life, right? Because there were 20 plus dragons, and there was one Marvel Crouching Tiger in Dynasty, wasn't even in Uprising. We had the EA Phoenix Flame, but there was also the EA, Dragon. So, it was a very uneven distribution, but this was when we started to see like proper full art Marvels appearing rather consistently in packs, which is something that did continue on. Then we had Dynasty, which is kind of like a blip, because Dynasty had these weird, let's jump over to it. It's kind of had this like weird, we're not full arts, but we're kind of like prettier and darker, and we've got a different border, which people either loved or hated, and haven't really maintained a good value. Like the ones that have maintained value from this set are Emperor and the Command and Conquer Fabled, right? Both of which are very, very hard to pull and look very good. Crown of Dominion, obviously, because it's EA, is a bit different, but you see stuff like Hanabi Blaster and things. And okay, to a certain extent, they're just not played that much, and the ones that are played, are a bit higher in value, but they're really not. Like, they didn't capture the imagination in the same way. It's just a black version of a card compared to like an EA, right? And then we kind of had I would say, Outsiders was fine. We had the Codex Marvels, but, those Codex Marvels are nice, but again, limited to two classes. We had these EAs, which aren't really delivering a lot on the EA front. One of the problems with EAs in this game is like there has to be something interesting happening off the screen that makes it worthwhile having an EA. Otherwise, we just get to see the legs of the person in the photo, and it's not actually that good because the text is all there. So either there needs to be not as much text, so you can drop the let's look at Crown of Dominion. So you can drop the picture more and show more of it, or you need something going on that makes it fun to own that EA. Then we had Bright Lights, which was, to be honest, unfortunately, an unconditional failure in terms of art design. I mean, we had Singularity, which is awesome. We had Spring Tunic reprints, and that's fine. Again, an EA, which is good if you like boobs, but otherwise, great. We get to see her chest armor that is very well sculpted, not super practical, but anyway, that's fantasy settings for you. we didn't even get an EA adaptive plating, which is weird because that would have looked quite cool on an EA or full art on the back or something. And then we had these weird marvels that aren't actually marvels in the Evo series, where it's cold foil but not actually different in any way, shape, or form, and kind of just a bit crap, if I'm being honest. And they've acknowledged themselves that they thought that kind of let down, but by the time they realized they weren't happy with it, it was too late to change. So that was a misstep. But then we had a big change into heavy hitters when they made one of the best decisions that they have made to date in terms of art. So one of the things I think that delineates 3.0, okay, because these are the 3 markers. We're now 10 minutes into the video. I know you guys are listening. The 3 clear markers of 3.0 beginning in FAB are this. Quality of game design. So design of game pieces. Fundamental to the game. I'm going to talk about the fact there is a huge shift between the quality of the design before and after heavy hitters. Quality of the marvels and the approach to art and the distribution of value in the set, which is partly aided by the heroes being designed well, right? And the third one is just game feel, pack open feel, and, this nebulous quality feel, right? We've got design, we've got prices, and we've got this kind of feeling of the game just being better, growing, being better for the community, right? So let's draw that line for you then. Let's talk a little bit about game design. So we have Welcome to Wraith. It is the base set of the game. It is full of the basic abilities. It is deliberately not that complicated. We have Arcane Rising that comes in and gets a little bit more complicated, not necessarily in a good way. A lot of the things they tried out in Arcane Rising didn't pay off and are either banned or not functional anymore. If we think about Viserai with Skeleta, if we think about Kano, who I've argued many times is detrimental to the game and I think breaks fundamental rules of the games in terms of like his combo turn just not being playing the game the way other people are playing the game, etc., etc. I don't really want to go into that now, but I think Kano is a mistake from a game design perspective, and I think the fact that he's still in the game is only because of the Living Legend system that has been chosen. I think if there was a different way to rotate him out without breaking the promise of Living Legend to the fans, that would have already been done. I see Kindle as a way to route him towards Living Legend by giving him additional power. I could do a whole video on that. We're not going to. But just to say that Arcane Rising was... So Welcome to Wraith was, hey, we're here. These are the game mechanics. What are you going to do with them? Arcane Rising was, here's our first idea for how things get a bit freaky. Crucible of War was just expanding on these guys, giving them new tools, making more mistakes. Monarch was, this is talents. They're going to be cool. But some of the talents were busted. And that's okay because they were trying it for the first time. Tales of Aria was COVID, lockdown. We can't test this properly. We're having mental breakdowns. Shit slipped through the net. The basic ideas are cool, but they don't really chill or vibe well with the fundamental aspects of the game. Fusing requiring an extra card in the hand, but not really giving the value of an extra card once you fuse it is kind of a fundamental problem with understanding how the power level of the game works. Plus, you've got stuff like Duskblade. Plus, you've got stuff like Crown of Seeds. There's just loads of problems, but it was experimental and fun, right? It was. Everfest didn't have the impact people wanted because it was more of a fun set. This is kind of the unglued of FAB. It had potions, it had betting and it didn't have betting and wagering, but it had like, you can have copper and stuff like that. And it had a few powerful cards, which is what keeps the value of the set up. But aside from that, didn't really do much except bring in Stavro, who also wasn't balanced properly. So, experimental, fun, but not really what people wanted at that point. People wanted more WTR, to be honest. People want more, here's a class, here's fundamentals for the class, here's a whole staple of how this game plays well. And we began to see with Everfest the fundamental flaws in the supplemental set design, right? Because it tried to give tools for everyone, but in doing that didn't bring enough tools to anyone to deliver a good experience. And one or two classes inevitably got a power card anyway, so what's the point, right? Then Uprising comes along, massive power boost, but, and here's a big change, right? So previously, Monarch had come out, brought a lot of power into the talented versions of the sets. Tales of Aria had done the same. Talented heroes were good. Uprising came again and did it more than previously had been done. It siloed a lot more of the power of the talents into these heroes. So where there's an argument that Tales of Aria brought some stuff for previous classes, right? And, things like Bolt and Shot and stuff like that are used. The fact is that a lot of the power has always been in the talents. What Uprising did is kind of cement that silo divide between talents and non-talents and really just bring power in for talents, as well as bringing ice in, again, as an element, more control in Icelander. But there were issues with design here as well. Like, as much as we've seen problems with Tales of Aria in terms of just crazy stuff that was too good or need to be banned, problems with Everfest in terms of like not being impactful enough, not being as fun as they thought it would be, like the effects and the potions and stuff just aren't as good or as fun as I think they were intended to be. Uprising kind of said, we're back again. In a good way, like in a good way, as in, here's a set, the heroes are powerful, they're fun, thematic, the dragons are good, the ninjas are good, the ice heroes are good. Still haven't cracked draft, still can't make, the draft set feels unbalanced, the dice roll's too impactful, people are forcing Fi all the time to the extent that there's 5 people on Fi and no one on the other heroes, like, the draft is still problematic, but we're learning, right? Dynasty comes in and it's kind of supplemental sets, what people have expected from supplemental sets. Bit of power, bit of interesting equipment. But Dynasty kind of shows you the reason that supplemental sets were eventually scrapped, is that no one really enjoyed this. They didn't bring enough tools for everyone. And inevitably one class did just get pushed by them. But because they were floated as everyone's getting pushed, and because supplemental sets were usually focused on generic class cards rather than talents, the push was usually quite large. So it's one of the reasons that supplemental sets got killed. And one of the things you'll actually see when we talk about FAB 3.0 is that the role of supplemental sets in the game, so this role of supplemental sets, which is to bring all these heroes up to a new power level and give them tools to be meta relevant, has been served by the expansion slot. So the addition of 15 Majestics, usually heroes, whatever, into the expansion slot has actually replaced the entire purpose of the supplemental sets. And I would argue has had as much impact, no offense, to the designers who made these sets, because I think, they were fun and I enjoyed them when they came out, having been a Fab fan for quite a long time. But I feel like the one of the reasons that supplemental sets have been mostly canned is that the expansion slot does the job of a supplemental set with 15 cards. Like, it does the job. You give a little boost to the heroes that need it. You provide a new Majestic staple that fills a role that makes the other cards in the set relevant. Something like Long Draw Half Glove comes along and says, well, Warmongers was screwing Azalea. Well, now you're not so screwed every turn. Here's a little boost. And it's doing wonders. Do you need supplemental sets anymore? You don't. Outsiders then comes in and we see an experiment, which is, what if we didn't print a talent set again? Right? And it was good. It was good. They printed a lot of stuff. But, and here's my big caveat, I thought Outsiders was a great set. Lots of power for a lot of people. Codex is obviously a very strong card, but it has proven to not be like, it's good. It's busted. Why it's £40 still, I don't know. Open more Outsiders. It's a great set. But Codex is good, but it's play aroundable. The classes that use it well get a lot of value out of it, but it doesn't completely, dominate the game in a way that other cards have done or threatened to do in the past, especially things that have gotten banned like Crown of Seeds. So, Outsiders was great. The flaw with Outsiders isn't really design. Like, there are some design issues with it. But the flaw of Outsiders is really that the limited, the draft, still good, but not amazing, right? Good, but not amazing. Good, but you could still draft a fatigue deck, right? Then we have, hey, Outsiders was great and were really stable, but let's put another supplemental set out that feels like a draft set and doesn't really bring a lot of to any hero. And all of these commons kind of feel like they're padding. And to be honest, I'm trying to get through this video without being too mean, while also just being as honest as I can. I think Dusk Till Dawn was a terrible set, right? Okay, I think it was experimenting with bringing back elements and talents and talents that people liked. I think it was terrified of bringing back those talents too powerfully. And, you know, the designers have spoken about this. They didn't want Prism to come out the gate and just instantly dominate the field again. And I think when you're designing with that in mind, you don't make the best set that you can make. I think you make a set that feels a bit weak. And there's a reason that Dusk Till Dawn has not performed very well price history-wise, and the reason that it's not a very popular set. Then you have Bright Lights, which is, I applaud it as an experiment into what a single-class set will be. And I have notably said that I think in the future, it might be the only way to actually introduce a new class into FAB and give it the support it needs is to do a full class set. But I feel like Bright Lights isn't it. And that's just because, as I've said before, like there's several things that go into an evaluation of a set. And one of those is, what's the limited play experience? And I feel like for the majority of players, the limited play experience in Bright Lights was not good, right? And that is because it's a complicated set and the signposts weren't there. The level of complexity to play it well wasn't there. And also the cards you needed to build like a good limited deck were quite specific for each hero. So, you know, if you didn't get those cards, that hero felt bad, but you might not have a good enough pool to play a different hero, right? So you start to see the problem with a set as complicated as Bright Lights. And then you have the whole fatigue plan where the guy who gets 37 playable block 3s wins because he can fatigue. What starts to change? And things start to change. Things start to get very interesting. We have the rise of heavy hitters. We have the start of an idea that in limited, we're going to have 30-pack card limits. That started with heavy hitters, right? I'm not playing myself. We had the idea that you're going to have a 30-card limit coming into the game. Let me double check this. Sorry, no, I was misspeaking. That came in with part of the misfail. Well, we have the change that comes in heavy hitters that I want to talk about. Is basically in terms of like design and synergy, right? Whereas Bright Lights felt chaotic, it felt like there were gaps, it was very hard for people to grasp. Heavy Hitters is viewed to a lot of people as the new WTR, right? It is viewed as the new base entry set into FAB. It has very simple concept, it has very attractive and thematic design, it has very attractive heroes. The action point economy is good, you can get go again, but it's not super easy all the time. Often you get go again next turn with agility tokens rather than having it this turn. You know, that kind of thing. It feels like it's together, and it feels like it rewards you for learning the concepts, and it feels like it pays off very well. It was fun in draft, it was fun in limited, people really enjoyed it. The important point about turning a corner is kind of like a whole collective feeling where we end the experimentation that's happening up until here and we get something clicks. It's hard to explain, right? Because in my notion of FAB 3.0, something has clicked that has fundamentally changed between Bright Lights and Heavy Hitters. And the things I've been talking about design-wise are one element of that Heavy Hitters feels like it's designed with lessons learned from, 4 years of FAB design and play from WTR, or 5 years even, from WTR to Heavy Hitters. And I've been here for most of that. I can tell you the difference in feeling between opening and playing with Heavy Hitters to opening and playing with other sets, and the kind of, we'll say that the variance, I guess, is one of the reasons that it's felt a little bit better, is that there's a little bit more variance, which means that the person with the best deck doesn't always win, and that's actually felt quite good. And that's carried on into part of the misfail, where the attack reactions in something like New, or the ability to transcend and search for a card, actually brings in a bit of fun variance as well. So maybe a little sprinkling of variance is the difference. But I'd like to know, just when we're talking about here, and I've started talking about design differences between everything I've seen before Heavy Hitters and after Heavy Hitters, do you feel like design has turned that corner? Like, let me know what you think, if you agree with me. Because for me, and certainly for the people I've been talking to, it feels like the designers of this game have collectively turned a corner. Now, I'm not going to speculate what's happened internally. That's up for you. Take it as a compliment or a criticism. Personally, I view it as a compliment. It's me saying, hey, you were doing these things. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. Now you're knocking balls out of the park. Now you're in your golden age, right? You've grown up, you learned some smarts, you're doing things well, you're hitting the balls out of the park, right? I personally view it as a compliment, right? Because as I've said, I've liked a lot of this, right? I liked a lot of this. It's kept me playing for 5 years, but I've really liked what we've had for the last 2 sets, and I really liked what I'm seeing for the upcoming Rosetta set as well, which we'll talk about in a bit. Because, and one of the things I want to highlight is that while I've praised some of these things for being experimental and said they didn't work. Do you know the difference between Part the Mistveil and something like Tales of Aria, right? Or even Rosetta, as we've currently seen it, and Tales of Aria. The difference is that the experiments have worked, right? Because Fuse didn't work. It fundamentally ignored a tenet of the game, which is that 2-card hands are good and 3-card hands are expensive block-wise, right? Because there's inevitably an on-hit effect that comes in for 5 or 6 that you might need to block, and suddenly that 3-card hand becomes bad, but a 2-card hand is good. That's a fundamental view of looking at the game. Obviously, aggro decks try and play with 4 or 5-card hands, but there's a reason that aggro decks fall apart when they're targeted with these 5 or 6 power disruption cards, right? Because they have to block them. It takes away the cards from their hand. Tales of Aria was like, you need 3 cards, so you're going to be playing these 3-card hands. But what happens to the 3rd card was the problem, right? Because you don't always want to arsenal it. If you're fusing with a blue earth card, that's not your arsenal, right? Versus the experiments we've seen in Part the Mistveil and Heavy Hitters. Wager is an experiment, right? Whether that was successful, I think, still to be written. Transcend, massive experiment. What happens if we put 9 non-block cards that we have to flip over? The difference is they're paying off. And that's a sign the designers are getting better at finding ways to play with the fundamental strategy. Because I've said in previous videos, the fundamental core of Fab is not necessarily that good long term. You have 4 cards a turn, you have 12 damage, or you have 12 block and trying to get to 16 damage, right? Each card is worth 4 block and 16 damage. That's the math of Fab, right? You're trying to keep a 5-card hand so you can present 20 damage, or you're trying to keep defense reactions so you can block more than 12, or you're trying to say, okay, well, I'll take 6 from you because I can present 8, and all that kind of Fab maths, right? Playing with that is vital, and I feel like everything above this line, everything above the Heavy Hitters line, understands that math and transcends it with a little bit of variance and a little bit of experimentation that makes it fun. And below that, we've got a list of all the things they had to do to learn how to do that, right? It's not a dig, because designing card games takes a long time. There's been a lot of fun found down here. So that's the refinement. The first refinement is the design refinement, right? I just think things have gotten better. Now let's talk about limited. You'll notice if you look at the Rosetta launch window, 8 packs is how many packs you'll be playing with in sealed. The feedback consistently across the board. 8-pack sealed is miles better in Fab than 6 packs ever was. You get choices. You can usually choose between which hero you're going to go into, usually with a choice between between 2 or 3, but usually there's you've got a choice between 2 different heroes. You have options for sideboards if there are cards that aren't as good in certain matchups as others. You just have a large amount of cards to put through. Now, the trade-off is new players are a bit more daunted at pre-releases, but I will go to a sealed Part the Mistveil calling, right? I will. If there is one that makes sense for me to go to economically, I will go to it. I think the set is gas. I think the sealed version is fun, right? The same is kind of true for Heavy Hitters. The same is not true for Bright Lights. The same is not true for Outsiders. It's not true for Uprising, right? I have said no to sealed callings in cheap locations that I could have gone to for all of these sets. Guess what? Something's changed. 8 packs is a big difference. The fact that Rosetta has 8 packs as well, that is something. The other thing, of course, has changed. 30 card deck limits. Let it never go away. 30 cards is a good limit for sealed, right? Because fatigue is always there as a problem. The person who gets 33 blocks can block more consistently than the amount of damage that can be put out by a limited deck, typically, right? Unless you've got, the God limited deck. So let's remove at least the idea of fatigue by card advantage from the picture. 30 cards standard limit. And limited in Fab has never been better. I have drafted this set about 30 times, and I'm still learning things when I draft it. Now, maybe that's because I'm drafting it while playing Final Fantasy XIV, or I'm drafting it while eating dinner, or, chilling out, and maybe I need to be more active in my draft, and that's something for my Nats tournament review video. But the fact is that I'm still firing up this and drafting just casually, because I think the set's brilliant. And I haven't done that a lot in Fab before, if I'm honest. I really haven't. I don't think they've been as good, and I think that some sets, even sets where I've 6-0'd. I 6-0'd at Nationals in draft the year that Uprising was out because I was really good at playing Icelander in draft. I've done very well drafting Monarch because I knew how to make the set work for me. But I think this is the best that it's been, and I'm excited for the next one. So when I say 3.0 has turned a corner in Limited as well, I think that's true. Now, I know some people have said heavy hitters got a bit boring after you knew exactly what to look for, etc., but I still think it was very, very well designed. And especially if you view heavy hitters as this is the new entry to Fab, then that's what it should be. Let Part the Misfail be complicated. Let Rosetta be complicated. And when your friends say, hey, what's that Fab set that I can get into that's accessible and, isn't too expensive, you can say heavy hitters. It's really fun. It's got 4 classes in. 4 classes? Brute, Guardian, Warrior. And it's got 3 classes in. And it's really fun. And it's really accessible. And, it's not that expensive. Speaking of expense, and I know this video is getting long, so the final point of this video, let's just talk about price for a second, right? You got WTR, okay, where some things are a little bit more expensive because they're rainbow foils and things like that. But, if you look in general, 250, and this is partly due to reprints in the unlimited section, but the average value of a Majestic is £2, right? Dynasty, the average value of Majestic, do you even want me to tell you? It's not good. Supplemental set value is not good, right? We can keep going down past all of this stuff. Tiger Snipes is about £2, right? The value of these sets just not hold up. You've got Tales of Aria. Now, this is a bit of a weird one because all the things are kind of like banned at the moment, but you can buy your average Majestic for less than £1. It's like not particularly good. Bright Lights is kind of the same. Your Marvels are 20 quid. That's pretty low. Your EAs are whatever. Once you get down to your Majestics, you're looking at £2 again, which is really good for picking up playables. But it's not really what you want if you want people to be opening boxes and having fun opening boxes. Outsiders does a little better, but again, the problem is still there. But if we look at heavy hitters, we go down to the Majestics. I think we'll start to see more regular Majestics. £6, £5, £8. That's pretty good. Obviously the ones that aren't seeing play yet, that much, Show No Mercy, etc., are down at £2. Some that really just don't see that much play, up the ante. Poor Olympia, is quite low. Seduce Secrets are quite low, but the staples are staying around £5 or above, which is good. And then you've got these weird warrior ones like Heavy Blade Flurry and stuff, which are above £10. And obviously Mistveil is weird because it's like happening with, it's kind of the national set at the moment. It's the new spice, but you do have Majestics, even regular ones, going for, wow, is Weakest Link at 20 quid now? Okay, yeah, this set should be opened a bit more. These are at £8, etc., etc. There's lots of good value happening. But more important than Majestics is one part of the picture I want to look at. I also kind of want to look at just like the legendary side of things, right? Because one of the big changes from FAB 2.0 to 3.0 was that, one of the big changes from FAB 1.0 to 2.0 was that the legendary stopped being cold foil and started being rainbow foil and cold foil in the same box. And you can kind of see that here. We start to see that in Dynasty and things like that as well. And you can see that the cold foils do command a bit of a premium over their rainbow foil counterparts. So Black Tech Whisperers 37 versus 71. So often, double the price there. Compared to these ones, which are kind of sitting around the £30 mark for rainbow foils. That's actually been quite a good change, brought apart by FAB 2.0. That brought the value of rainbow foil majestic legendaries down. But the knock-on effect of that, which is important to consider as well, is that if you only open a rainbow foil legendary, you're not paying for your box anymore, right? Which you used to do. If you opened a legendary, you were like, cool, that's the box paid for. If it was the right legendary, you might have paid for a box and a half. If you got some decent Majestics, maybe you made your way up to the value of a case. And I'm not saying you should open a case of value every time you open a case, but there should be some nice bits in there that can kind of get you where you need to be, right? What then changed in my new FAB 3.0? The answer is they just started putting a lot more Marvels in. So we have the same. Here's a cold foil, here's a rainbow foil, and the legendaries have always commanded lots of value if they're generics. Here's a Fabled, which is actually below the rainbow foil balance of justice just because of how good it is. But then they took a free win. They added full art heroes into the set. It's just a win. It's just a free win, right? Just to add those in, it's just a free win. And by doing that, they added tons more value or potential value to the box. I mean, even if you open a Betsy, it's going to be hard to shift, but it does have a value. If you open a KO or a Kasai, people will want that for a reasonable price. They love these heroes, especially Victor. You know, I have an EA Victor. And then in Part of the Mistveil, they learned the lesson doubly. And they said, well, wait a second. Let's not just do EA heroes. That was a win. Let's do that again. But let's also just add other Marvels to the set that people want. Let's add some EAs. And more importantly, let's add EAs that are actually EAs, right? Now, okay, 12 Petal Kasaya is a bit of a bait EA because all you can see is his legs, but they do add the head of the guy in. So if you like the character, you can see that. Extended Art Mask of Recurring Nightmares is actually fantastic because in the normal version, they look like people with 2 hands. And then the extended art version, they look like people with 4 hands. So suddenly you're seeing this is what extended art equipment should be. If you can't remove the text box because it makes it less clear, like with Traverse the Universe, then you need to make something fun happen in the other half of the art. Give someone a reason to own this beyond just, you know, having it and having it be the other reason. Then, of course, we have all of the Transcending Chi. I can't really show it to you easily because the flip side of the Chi is just fantastic. You know, the regular one looks like this, and then the full art one is a whole massive full art thing that's fantastic. I'll see if I can bring one up. Not to mention, you have obviously all of these Lunar Transcends, all of these full arts that you can open as well. And then you have the full art heroes, which are brilliant too. And then on top of all of that, they add in the gold pack, right? Which you can get this random Enigma New Moon or an Enigma Marvel, which is currently selling for £9,000. So box experience went from good in heavy hitters, it went from okay, bad in bright lights, because the Marvels and stuff were mostly terrible, to amazing in heavy hitters, to fantastic in Enigma, in Part of the Mistveil. And then if you think, well, okay, did they learn that lesson? If we bring up Rosetta, guess what? It should say down here, there are 24 Marvels in the set. Now, 8 of those are heroes, but that means that beyond those 8 heroes, there are another 16 Marvels in the set. What are those going to be? Those are going to be staple cards for the classes that are going to see play. They are going to be the equivalent of the Transcend cards in this set. They're going to be EA and Marvel versions of, you know, things like as important to these classes as the Transcend cards are to the classes in Part of the Mistveil. If they are, and I'm just saying, like, if we take a step back, and if they're basically the equivalent of these ones from, you know, EA Facebreaker or Marvels, which aren't even EA or double-sided or anything, if they are those, then we're taking a step back. The fact that these cards are now in the expansion slot means that they can be as creative as they want, and they can create beautiful things. And hopefully they've taken that on board, because this takes the box opening experience from Fab from a, shit, I didn't get a legendary, this case sucked, into a, wow, I didn't get a legendary, but look at the EA Transcend card I got. You know, do I even... No, I just have a Marvel. But okay, actually I can show you, right? So I've got a cold foil Mistcloak Gully here. And you see on the back, amazing. I pulled one of these full art Transcend Traverse cards. And if they do the same thing in Rosetta, then it just reinforces. FAB 3.0 is here. They've discovered a formula for how to make limited work and how to make box opening work that feels fantastic. And they really need to keep both of those two things. And if they've done that, we've turned a corner. So the final takeaway, I mean, do you agree with my notion of a FAB 3.0? Do you feel like we haven't really turned a corner, it's just a continuation? Or do you feel like me that something has changed? Like maybe it's a small fundamental thing, but it feels like something has changed in the basic design that has elevated the game. And maybe it's the heavy hitters reset. Maybe it's the experimentation in Part of the Mistveil. But it's a combination of things, from a limited getting better with 8 packs and 30 card limits, to there being just so many more Marvels and things to collect and gorgeous pieces in the game, to the Japanese expansion and the influx of a whole new community. There feels like a new energy in the room. Like, do you feel like we've reached FAB 3.0? That's my question to anyone still listening. I feel like we have, and I was speaking to some vendors and stuff at UK Nats last weekend, and they think we have as well. They were just looking at the average price of a Majestic and the average EV of a box with the Transcend cards in, and they were like, I can open this, and it's worth it, and people want these cards because the heroes are well designed. And they're like, if LSS keeps doing this, this is going to continue to be, even grow to be an even bigger game. So I think we're at FAB 3.0. If you disagree with me, let me know. That's it, really. I'm in Steelfur. This is Steelfur Speaks. Obviously, tune in. Regular FAB content. Not usually this long. This is a 40-minute video. Usually I aim for 20 minutes, but I just had a whole thing I wanted to talk about today, and it's hot. I also talk a little bit about cooking sometimes, and I even show some cooking off sometimes. I talk a bit about writing, that kind of thing, but mostly just about FAB, having a good FAB experience in kind of a relaxed and a chill way that kind of gets you into a vibe of listening. So let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any thoughts. If you want to support me on Patreon, you can do that. I don't really do big tiers with it. It's just, hey, you're doing a good job. We want to see you getting to more events and stuff. Here's £3 a month on Patreon. If you're listening to me every week and you're listening to, every episode, that's kind of a couple of hours, maybe 2-3 hours of content a month. Is that worth £3? I don't know. That's up to you. But it is there as an option for you who really want to support me. That's it, really. I will speak to you all soon. Have a great one.